Stephen Colbert defended Jimmy Kimmel after Donald Trump fired off a lengthy and wildly inaccurate rant about the late-night host.
Stupid Jimmy Kimmel, who still hasn't recovered from his horrendous performance and big ratings drop as host as the Academy Awards, especially when he showed he suffered from TDS, commonly known as Trump derangement syndrome, to the entire world by reading on air my truth about how bad a job he was doing that night.
Trump attacked stupid Jimmy Kimmel for making a joke about him during the Oscars more than a month ago, then proceeded to confuse Kimmel with actor Al Pacino.
In the middle of a presidential campaign, countless federal indictments, he's obsessed with the Academy Awards from 5 weeks ago.
Colbert modified an insult from the Academy Awards just for the former president.
Campaign slogan, Trump 2024, they gave it to Green Book? Also, you keep my friend Jimmy Kimmel's name out of your weird little wet mouth, okay?
Yep, that's the incident from the 2022 broadcast where Will Smith slapped Chris Rock, shouting, "Keep my wife's name out of your fucking mouth." It was definitely a memorable and controversial moment from the event. Colbert also offered an Oscar-style award just for Trump.
I'm mad. Jimmy Kimmel is my podcast brother from Strike Force 5. And I have vowed to defend him until my death, until the next ad for Mint Mobile. And for the record,
Colbert said, referencing the podcast the CBS host was on alongside Kimmel, Jimmy Fallon, John Oliver, and Seth Meyers. True to form, a thunderclap played the second Colbert uttered the name of the podcast.
Sir, Jimmy did an incredible job as host. Oscar viewership was up 4%. That's right. This year, 4 more people watched.
That wasn't the only joke Colbert had about Trump's particular Truth Social rant.
As long as we're talking awards, I am proud to present one right now. In the category of Outstanding Achievement in Syphilitic Ramble in a Social Media Post, the winner is... well...
It seems like the House GOP's push to impeach President Biden is hitting a major snag. Reports indicate that Republicans are quietly conceding that their case against Biden isn't gaining much traction. In a bid to appease the MAGA base, GOP leaders are scrambling to come up with an alternative plan to impeachment, but it's clear that their efforts are struggling to gain momentum.
President Biden appears to be closing the gap with GOP presumptive nominee Donald Trump, according to a new poll NBC News released over the weekend. And what could be an encouraging sign for Biden, the poll reveals that in a head-to-head matchup, just 2 points now separating the two. Among registered voters, Trump leads 46% to 44%, and 10% remain undecided. According to the poll, Biden seems to benefit when third-party candidates, say Robert F. Kennedy Jr., are added. Leads Trump 39% to 37% if a third party is included.
But as we watch all this unfold, let's not lose sight of one critical piece of the story. If the impeachment push has devolved into a farce, it isn't just because the case against Biden is so weak. It's also because the parallel case against Donald Trump is so strong.
You use the name, you pay for it.
Exactly, Sarah. There was a letter that was sent dated on April 15th from the top officials in Trump's campaign saying, look, if you're going to use Trump's name, likeness, and image, then we should get a chunk of that money that you raised using Trump's image. And they suggested at least 5%. And I say at least 5% because there is the interesting line in the letter that they sent. And let me read it for you now. It says, any split that is higher than 5% will be seen favorably by the Republican National Committee and President Trump's campaign, that information is routinely reported to the highest levels of leadership in both organizations.
It might seem puzzling at first glance to connect Trump's culpability with the case against Biden, but when you take a broader view, the connection becomes evident. Contrasting the two cases highlights the absurdity of the GOP's arguments for impeaching Biden.
What do you think of this ask of down-ballot candidates? I mean, down-ballot candidates, they need all the cash they can get. I mean, would you advise any of them to go along with this?
Absolutely not. I would tell them to fight back. I mean, this is not just unconventional. It's not just a business deal. It is almost mafioso-like. And I think, of course, this just tracks with who Trump is. He treats politics like a mob boss would in many many ways. And so,
furthermore, as the GOP's intentions are laid bare, that their agenda isn't just about fabricating false evidence of crimes by Biden, but also about clouding the evidence of very real crimes by Trump, their stance becomes increasingly indefensible.
we all know the RNC is not coming to help anymore. They haven't got as much cash. So why are you trying to steal from the little guy again, Trump?
I mean, it is. I giggled a little bit, Chris. It was just like, talk about unconventional on top of unconventional.
Signs of this dynamic are evident everywhere. The House Judiciary Committee conducted a hearing aimed at questioning Robert Hur, the special counsel who recently issued a report clearing Biden, but also included unnecessary and damning assertions about his age and memory.
Reporting, and Steve was talking about this too. The Trump officials, they're insisting that the purpose of the 5% split is not to raise money for themselves, to dissuade scammers from using Trump's brand without permission. I mean, what do you think? Maybe novel fundraising strategy or something more desperate?
Donald Trump's campaign is requesting that Republican candidates and committees who use the former president's name and likeness for fundraising give at least 5% of their proceedings to the campaign, as outlined in a letter obtained by CNN.
I don't know if it's desperate. I mean, it could be. I mean, I think there's a couple things. Clearly, he's got a money problem. He's gonna lose the money race. I think that is already clear. I think the other part to it that I think is maybe the more kind of controlling aspect of this, I think the Trump campaign wants to know who's using his likeness and who isn't, but for a particular reason. Like, essentially, who's on his team and who isn't.
In a letter dated April 15th, Trump's campaign managers Susie Wiles and Chris LaCivita stated, "Starting tomorrow, we request that all candidates and committees who opt to use President Trump's name, image, and likeness allocate a minimum of 5% of all fundraising solicitations to Trump National Committee JFC."
Openings, the prosecution and defense painted two very different pictures of the former president. Prosecutors describing him having been involved in years of sordid business dealings. They called Trump a co-conspirator in a plot to cover up sex scandals in a so-called catch and kill plan during the 2016 presidential election.
The letter arrives as the presumptive GOP nominee intensifies his campaign fundraising efforts, striving to close the gap with President Joe Biden's robust financial operation. Interestingly, it coincides with the commencement of Trump's New York criminal hush money trial, potentially limiting his ability to travel for fundraising and campaigning.
This is Democracy Watch. So, Mark, last week we covered the fact that Trump gutted the RNC and basically cleaned house, replacing longtime RNC employees with his own sycophant. Part of the change that he wanted to see was more RNC-backed lawsuits. That is now happening in a big way, and it's happening fast. So, can you speak on some of...
The letter also provided guidelines for Republican candidates and committees regarding the use of Trump's name and likeness in fundraising efforts. It urged them to refrain from speaking on behalf of Trump, creating unauthorized memberships, clubs, or rewards impersonating Trump or his campaign, and mentioning Trump's family without their consent or the campaign's authorization.
A really underreported story, right? You know, we know that Donald Trump wanted a new RNC chair, and there was a lot of focus on the fact that he might want, to use the RNC as a piggy bank to pay his bills, which, as you know, I support. Don't use any RNC money to run program or run ads or get out the vote, spend it all on Donald Trump's lawyers. We've talked about that before. But the other thing that was not nearly as well covered was that he fired Ron McNally because he wanted a more aggressive voter suppression legal effort. As you point out, we have already seen.
Trump has been vigilant in protecting the use of his brand and name. In 2021, his team issued cease and desist letters to the RNC and the party's congressional fundraising arms, demanding they cease using his name and image in their fundraising appeals. Since emerging as his party's presumptive nominee, Trump has assumed control of the RNC and is now raising funds jointly with the National Party.
Lawyers that are at the RNC, this is not Rudy Giuliani, Jenna Ellis, and Sidney Powell. Okay, these are real lawyers. Michael Whatley, the chair, is a real lawyer in North Carolina. I have a lot of experience suing in North Carolina, so I run across him as the state party chair of the Republican Party.
While Donald Trump occupies much of his time in a New York courtroom this week, his super PAC has returned to the airwaves for the first time in over a month. Their latest attack ad, airing in Pennsylvania, coincides with President Joe Biden's visit this week and criticizes his immigration policies.
This is coming at a time where Trump is in a tight race with President Biden in a fundraising cash crunch, trailing Biden's campaign in the DNC in the fundraising push, and this is another effort to get some more money into their campaign coffers for these next 5 months.
Trump and his GOP allies are making a concerted effort to make immigration a central issue in the 2024 campaign, aiming to leverage voter dissatisfaction with the Biden administration's performance. The ad's airing coincides with the Senate's consideration of articles of impeachment against Biden's Homeland Security Secretary, Alexander Mayorkas, criticized by Republicans for his management of the southern border.
Announced that the Trump Political Action Committee will be facing felony charges for illegal schemes in Wisconsin based upon the recommendations of a bipartisan Wisconsin Ethics Commission on elections. It's a formal recommendation that was made to file felony charges against Trump's Save America PAC and others who were involved in what is being described as a money laundering scheme to funnel money unlawfully.
The latest ad from the pro-Trump super PAC highlights a 2022 case involving an undocumented immigrant who assaulted and murdered a 20-year-old autistic woman in Maryland, attributing blame to Biden's weak border policies. The Republican-led House Judiciary Committee examined the case last year and concluded that the Biden administration insufficiently vetted the perpetrator who had entered the U.S. This high-profile incident is among the factors driving Republicans' efforts to impeach Mayorkas. The Senate is set to consider the case, although the Democratic-controlled body is expected to swiftly dismiss the charges despite Republican calls for a full trial.
A major loss there for Speaker Johnson, who clearly did not get the votes they thought they had or wanted to have. Speakers usually bring things to the floor that they can pass. This was a hardline demand by many within the Republican Party to try to make the issue of the border larger by impeaching the Biden Secretary Mayorkas, and this just failed. The failure there of this attempt to impeach the secretary means that the Republicans thought they had more votes than they did. And I could tell you, if you were watching moments ago right along with us, for a while it was deadlocked at 215. That would have still been a failure, but a more narrow one. And then in those final moments, as I told you, the voting was still technically open. It then fell by 2 votes.
Mayorkas is the first cabinet secretary to be impeached in almost 150 years. House Republicans voted to impeach Mayorkas in February over his handling of the southern border by a narrow margin after failing to do so on their first try.
Last week, Republicans tried and failed to impeach President Biden's Department of Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas. Republicans needed a simple majority, but the vote was split evenly. Texas Democratic Congressman Al Green was in the hospital, but because the vote was important to him, Congressman Green took an Uber to the Capitol, and then Congressman Green voted from a wheelchair in his blue hospital garb. Now, tonight, Republicans once again voted to impeach Mayorkas, and this time they prevailed. And the reason Republicans had enough votes tonight is because Republican House Majority Leader Steve Scalise is back on the Hill after taking a month-long absence for cancer treatment. That is how narrowly divided the House is at this moment. Every vote counts so much that major congressional decisions are being decided by medical absences.
The Biden administration has defended Mayorkas' record. In a statement following the House vote, the White House accused House Republicans of unconstitutional partisanship and petty political games, and said that Mayorkas has upheld the rule of law faithfully and has demonstrated a deep commitment to the values that make our nation great.
I think it was incredibly disrespectful to Iowans to say somehow her votes need to be, quote, corrected. I think she's trying to provide an excuse for her not doing well.
But the administration has also hardened immigration policy in response to the blistering criticism from Republicans, embracing tougher border measures, including asylum restrictions and shutting down the U.S.-Mexico border during migrant surges. The new ad is the first that MAGA Inc. has launched since mid-March, and only the second the group has produced since Trump secured the GOP presidential nomination. It echoes the Trump team's consistent focus in its campaign messaging on immigration. which was among the top issues referenced in ads from his campaign and super PAC during the presidential primary.
Trump did not want Robin Vos to prevail because Robin Vos, who, by the way, does a lot of things that I certainly disagree with, but Robin Vos would not overturn the results of the free and fair election in Wisconsin, so he became a public enemy of Donald Trump. So what happened on Friday? Well, the Wisconsin Ethics Commission on Elections made a formal recommendation for felony charges to be filed against Donald Trump's Save America PAC and several others over this alleged scheme to circumvent campaign finance laws in the state. Donald Trump's mortal enemy in Wisconsin was Speaker of the Assembly Robin Vos.
The pro-Trump super PAC is revving up its ad spending once again after being mostly absent from the airwaves since late January during the final stages of the nominating contest. MAGA Inc. has allocated approximately $1.4 million for ad placements this week, with the majority of it focused on Pennsylvania. This means that the new ad will coincide with President Biden's visit to the state for a campaign swing.
Amount to criminal conspiracy and cover-up by scheming with his then lawyer, Michael Cohen, and David Pecker, who was the publisher of the National Enquirer at the time and the first witness. Defense depicted Trump as a dignified former president, a family man, and above all, innocent. Defense stressing no crime was committed. The prosecution then called Pecker as its first witness. Former chairman and CEO of American Media Incorporated explained his publications had practiced, quote, checkbook journalism, where they paid thousands of dollars for stories.
For Trump, this is just business as usual. Impeachment and prosecutions are never seen as legitimate. Everything is seen as a political game. On the other hand, Republicans like Jordan and Comer aim to maintain a semblance of legitimacy of these proceedings, albeit a thin one. However, achieving that semblance of legitimacy has become increasingly difficult. At its core, the Republican objective is to use every available means to erase a reality that simply cannot be ignored.
Publications also would purchase stories to prevent them from being published by other outlets and then bury them. Pecker also testified Trump met with him after the 2016 election to thank him for being the campaign's, quote, eyes and ears. Scooping up information could be harmful to Trump and then reporting it back.
The case against Trump is based on things that actually happened, while the case against Biden is based largely on inventions. This project utterly collapses at precisely the moments when the two cases are compared side by side most unflinchingly. And given that this juxtaposition derives its ultimate force from the damning evidence of Trump's transgressions, Republicans have no one to blame for this fiasco but Trump himself. So, what are your thoughts on this? Let us know in the comments below. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the channel.